So this week we had some really exciting announcements from the Pebble team on updates to the Pebble lineup, which is now going to be called Core Devices. So if you're not familiar, in 2016, Fitbit bought Pebble, and then a few years after, it kind of went defunct and not much really happened with it. But last year, Eric Migikovsky, the founder of Pebble, reached out to the Pebble acquisitioned Fitbit team and asked them to open source the code. And in January of this year, they did that. So I did a previous video of that if you want to check that out, going into this a little bit more in depth. But essentially what that means is that Eric was now able to develop new hardware with the existing software. And Eric has been posting a lot on his blog and his Twitter and whatnot, and the Repebble site. And it was actually really interesting to see because he was in China like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago at this point now. But that was a pretty quick turnaround of how he was able to source parts and manufacturers for these new devices that we will talk about in a second.
I decided to start making new Pebble watch hardware that will run Pebble OS. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time, whereas last time we did it as kind of a prototypical startup. We raised money, built out a big team, had up to 100 plus people working at Pebble. It taught me a lot about how to build a sustainable operation. And this time around, I think the number one goal is how do we build this in a sustainable manner? And I mean that sustainable in that we will continue building hardware long into the future and continue being able to support the operating system and update it and publish new features and that kind of thing.
But by far the biggest announcement is the increase in battery life from the original 7 days of these Pebble devices to now 30 days, which is huge. The only other watches I can think that are smartwatches that compare to that are probably the Garmin's that also have some solar power capability as well. But I believe that's probably largely due to the Bluetooth chip efficiency and just the processors now that are a little bit more efficient as well. And perhaps a larger battery. That is not specified in the spec sheets. With higher density batteries nowadays, that is certainly a possibility. So he's launching these 2 new devices called the Core 2 Duo and the Core 2 Time, which will launch this year. One will be in the middle of the year and one will be in the end of the year. So starting off with the Core 2 Duo, it is essentially a black and white screen and it is $149. So similar screen to this. I believe there were actually leftover panels from some manufacturer and maybe even some casings that he mentioned. And so the Core 2 Duo is a clever pun on Duo, which is not the Intel chip that you're probably thinking about from the past, but it is a pun on do-over. So kind of like a round 2 or maybe even round 3 at this point, if you consider the Pebble Time 2. And so it now brings a speaker for some of the AI features and also some dictation options. And note that this is not a touchscreen, it still has the buttons. They have stated that the buttons are 30% longer lasting. With my old Pebbles, and if you look on Reddit, you can see a lot of users had this issue as well, but the button durability over time was one of the biggest issues of those. Good to see that they've kind of redeveloped that and improved that. I'm hoping 30% longer is a conservative estimate, but time will tell. In addition to the speaker, it brings a linear actuator motor, a compass, and a barometer as well. This Core 2 Duo does not have heart rate tracking, but the screen is 176 dpi, just like the original one, black and white, and the design is polycarbonate as well. And this one is estimated to come out in July. So I'll link all this below if you're interested in taking a look at either the blog that he's posted or the actual devices if you're interested in purchasing one. I'm not affiliated with the company at all. I'm just very excited about these devices. And then the Core 2 Time is a little bit more of a premium device because it is made of metal and the screen is larger as well with the addition of color, just like the old Pebble 2 Time. One of the changes now is that it does add touch. So instead of having to use the buttons to kind of flick through a lot of menu systems, you can actually do touch for like responding to messages, but you do still have the buttons for music playback and all that. Eric was on a podcast where he explained why he's bringing back Pebble, mostly for the features that have not been fulfilled by any other smartwatch, but also for these core reasons that none of these watches offer till this day, even though they have much more advanced features than these devices.
What made Pebble special, though, is, and I guess we could chat about this more, also coincidentally the reason why I think it's time to bring it back. So what made Pebble a Pebble was its e-paper screen, which is a low power, always on, daylight readable, reflective screen rather than emissive, which pushes light out of it. There's e-paper, long battery life, lasted for a week plus. Fairly simple feature set. Like, we didn't try to boil the ocean and do everything that your phone could do. Focused on things like notifications, telling time. You know, who would expect your watch to be really good at telling time? Music control. We had physical buttons. We have physical buttons on the watch, so you could press the button to play, pause, skip tracks. You don't have to look at a touch screen and hit the right tiny little icon. And it was hackable. Anyone who wanted could write a watch face or build an app for Pebble.
And then the Core 2 Time also has a flat glass screen instead of a curved screen. It is also 202 DPI, so a little bit higher than the Core 2 Duo. And it also has a heart rate sensor built into it. Now, both of these are claimed to be IPX8 rating for water ingress protection, but that is listed as a target. So that's probably close to what they're aiming for, but that will be TBD when it comes out, actually. And this one should come out in December. Now, in my last video, I stated that I was hoping that they would launch an e-ink device. These are e-paper, by the way. They're basically these reflective LCDs or memory LCDs. I was hoping there might have been an e-ink watch like this. But now that I think about it, 30 days is a really good battery life. And that's something that with the motion, so e-ink is good because it's bistable and it's very good in the sunlight. But our LCD also is, and it has a little bit smoother animations because it is an LCD screen and not an e-ink screen. It seems like they made the right move. I would still obviously like to see one in the future that is e-ink, but who knows if that'll actually happen. Like I mentioned, I think this is a quick move into the market. And as you can see, some of the components are recycled or reused in some senses. But I do think that if this is successful, they will probably launch more premium watches. I was a really big fan of their like steel lineup and the time steel as well, and the round lineup as well. The problem with this one was really the battery life and the small screen, in my opinion. But if they could make a much bigger device with equally as good battery life, maybe like 20 days or something, and a bigger round screen, that would be incredibly cool to see. I know the Pebble community on Reddit is very active and people are rebuying a lot of these like refurbished Pebbles and whatnot. So I think the timing is really good for the Pebble community. And a lot of people have been yearning for this, I believe. Overall, I think this is a pretty exciting announcement from the Pebble team, or now called Core Devices. I'd love to hear your comments below if you have some thoughts about it, or if you're going to get one or not. A little bit more detail, you can check that out here about the whole process that they've been undergoing. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.